During World War II, the nation's railways had been taken into state control and played a major role in aiding the war effort. They were heavily damaged by enemy air attacks, and with only essential maintenance being carried out, the state of the rolling stock, tracks and infrastructure became increasingly run down. By the end of the war, the big four railway companies were essentially bankrupt. It was clear to Clement Attlee's post-war Labour government that the railways would be unable to survive in the private sector, and so plans were drawn up for their nationalisation, which would come into effect in 1948. This programme features rarely seen film covering the period from the end of the war in Europe in 1945 up to the first year of nationalisation. The material comes from the archives of Britain's cinema newsreel companies, along with films shot by the Southern Railway's own in-house film unit. On the 25th of June 1945, Southern Railway ferry services to the Channel Islands resumed after an interval of 5 years. King Arthur class number 752 Lynette arrives at Southampton docks with the first boat train from Waterloo. On board were 150 civilians and 100 service passengers. Jersey and Guernsey had been liberated from German occupation on the 9th of May 1945. The Southern Railway ferry Isle of Guernsey had been requisitioned by the Royal Navy at the start of the war and served both as a hospital ship during the Dunkirk evacuation in 1940 and as a troop ship during the D-Day landings in Normandy in 1944. With Britain's railways returning to some semblance of normality following the long years of war on the home front, one duty which befell the cleaners at this carriage depot on the Southern Railway, filmed on the 19th of July 1945, was the somewhat tedious job of scraping off all the blackout paint from the carriage windows. A substantial task, given that the Southern Railway owned nearly 11,000 coaches. Great Western Railway Castle class loco number 5022 Wigmore Castle double-heads the Royal train into Plymouth's Mill Bay Docks station on the 2nd of August 1945, carrying King George VI to the city for a meeting with American President Harry S. Truman on board the veteran British battlecruiser HMS Renown, moored in Plymouth Sound. Having attended the Potsdam Conference, Truman had flown into Plymouth from Germany that day. Partially decommissioned at this time, this was one of the last duties for the Renown, which had been built by Fairfields at Govan in Glasgow in 1916.
Corporal Cook and Rifleman Blackman, desert rats who drew lucky numbers in the home leave ballad. D-Day Dodgers, they ironically call themselves when the Normandy landings stole the headlines. But their lorries recall other famous days when the desert rats made history. Special trucks eat up 200 miles a day. But to men who have not seen their homes and the faces they love for 2, 3, 4 years, the ribbon of road crawls by at a snail's pace. From the sullen majesty of the Corinthian valleys, on to England, 900 miles away. Rifleman Blackman of Egham, Surrey, and Corporal Cook of Watford, two men whom Hitler forced to put on khaki, ride through broken Munich, where Nazism was born. Along the route, famous names ensure that the Eighth Army, though disbanded now, will live in the memory of its many triumphs. Ahead is England, and a brief savoring of the life a man can hope for in his homeland. At last, Calais, final stop before embarkation. This time, the sea trip in front of them is a short and pleasant one, very different from the hazardous days of troopship voyages and the tense silence of assault craft moving into hostile beaches. The traveller's journey is almost done. For two desert rats, Dover's chalk cliffs speak a welcome richer than words. Happiest job for the ticket collector is to pass through Leavemen. The London train could have wings and still not be fast enough for two men on the last lap of a 5-day journey home. They cross the Rhine and many another European river, but these are the best crossings of all, the ones that end at Charing Cross. Two men of A Company, 7th Battalion, the Rifle Brigade of Klagenfurt, Corinthia. They've come a long way together and see more than enough of action. Here's the start of their first home leave in years. Robert Louis Stevenson says somewhere that to travel hopefully is better than to arrive. But Corporal Cook, with a young wife, does not agree with Mr. Stevenson.
These busy scenes were filmed at London Waterloo Station in August 1945, as crowds of passengers queue up for their trains, eager to get away from the city and enjoy their first peacetime holiday break since 1939. Similar scenes were recorded at Paddington Station, with holidaymakers queuing for their trains to take them away to the West Country.
Is it possible for me to book to Lyme Regis, please?
Yes, madam.
One of the 4 halves, please.
Sure.
The Southern Railway's branch to Lyme Regis in Dorset is featured in this film, taken by one of the newsreel companies for a report about day trips, but never used at the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. No, that's right. That's right.
It appears that all the scenes were shot at Lyme Regis Station, the terminus of the 6 Mile branch, which ran off of the Southern's West of England main line at Axminster Junction.
Is there a change?
No, straight through.
Straight through. Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye.
get a brief shot of one of the two former London and South Western Railway 415 class radial tanks, which were based on the line at the time.
Here we are. Come on. Come on. Come on, quickly. Could you direct me to Jordan House, please? Oh, thank you very much. Thanks so much. Hold on. Here. Come on, Rose.
In the final shots, the visitors take a stroll along the seafront at Lyme Regis, still protected by anti-invasion barbed wire fences.
The Flying Scotsman, Britain's best-known express, gives passengers a sight they haven't seen since 1941. Restaurant cars and railway kitchens are back again. Wars may come and wars may go, but the sausage goes on forever. For men who've been off the job for 4 years, the chefs look pretty slick. But Chef Hock and Cook Humek are old hands at the game. The old restaurant cars, with their ornate fittings and fanciful names, are not back yet. Today's diners are on utility lines, ordinary Pullman coaches with tablecloths added. The dining car team were all doing the same job on the same train before the war. And it's not easy to serve the soup when the Scotsman is topping 60 miles an hour. Our cameraman covering the comeback of the dining car reports the food good for the times. Long-distance travellers tell veteran conductor Richards they certainly appreciate it.
Have you enjoyed your lunch, sir?
I've enjoyed it very much indeed, thank you. It's a very pleasant change after about, 4 years of sandwiches?
I can assure you we're very pleased to be back again. And I'm sure the public are pleased also, and they deserve it.
Thank you.
This instructional film, made for film shows in school classrooms, begins in the heart of London at Piccadilly Circus and was shot in late 1945. The statue of Eros had been removed for safety during the war. Bakerloo line trains first ran at Piccadilly Circus in March 1906. The Piccadilly line platforms here were opened in December the same year. Ticket machines had started to appear on the London Underground in the mid-1920s. These sloping front machines with the illuminated fare panels were introduced in 1937 and, unlike their predecessors, had the ability to give change. The children go down the escalators to the eastbound Piccadilly line platform, which is 108 feet below ground level. Trains on the Piccadilly line at this time were operated by what was known as standard stock. a fleet of over 1,400 cars, built by a number of manufacturers between 1923 and 1934. The standard stock had air-operated sliding doors, controlled by the guard. This stock was also used on the other deep-level tube lines, the Northern, Central and Bakerloo. These trains operated services on the Piccadilly line until the introduction of the 1959 tube stock. The leading vehicles were motor cars which had a large switch compartment behind the driver's cab that took up about a third of the length of the car. The destination for the children is Arnos Grove. Arnos Grove station was opened in September 1932 and is on the Piccadilly line's northern extension from Finsbury Park to Cockfosters, which was opened in 3 stages between 1932 and 1933, adding 8 new stations to the line. (1946) did not get off to a very good start for the railways, with this crash at 7 o'clock in the evening on New Year's Day at Lichfield Trent Valley Station in Staffordshire, which resulted in the deaths of 20 passengers. Failure of a set of points, caused by the extremely cold weather that day freezing the mechanisms, resulted in an express Fleetwood to London Broad Street fish train being diverted into the back of a stationary local passenger train standing in the up-platform loop. The leading coach of the passenger train, all of which were of wooden construction, was the only one not demolished in the collision. Its body and underframe were torn from the bogies and forced to one side, with the rear compartment destroyed. The other 3 coaches were completely wrecked. Half of the body of the second coach was found on the platform, about 120 feet behind the engine of the fish train, an LMS Black 5, which had driven into and through the rearmost coach, the roof and body of which were found astride the loco's tender. At the end of the war, the government held vast quantities of explosives which were no longer needed in peacetime. Much of this was dumped at sea from the small port of Cairnryan. These scenes show the result of an accidental explosion on the quayside, which fortunately caused little damage, considering the huge amount of weaponry passing through here each day. Bombs, mines, shells and small arms ammunition were all taken out to sea on barges for dumping, while cargoes such as gas shells were put into surplus freighters and scuttled. A much more disastrous explosion occurred at an ammunition depot in the Savernake Forest in Wiltshire on the 2nd of January 1946.
There was yet another disaster at Cadley, near Marlborough in Wiltshire. Here a number of soldiers lost their lives when part of the ammunition train they were unloading blew up. Even after this tragedy, the situation remained dangerous, for the countryside was spattered with live shells, mines and detonators. Here, the local commandant, Colonel Heron, is seen investigating the situation with the GOC. This affair might have been even more tragic. About 100 tons of ammo went up, but it's reported there were about another 500 tons which were not affected.
Eight soldiers were killed in the explosion. 2 Royal Army Ordnance Corps officers were awarded George Crosses for their heroism that day in rescuing injured men from beneath the burning trucks and saving the remaining wagons full of shells and mines from the blaze.
Refreshment cars are back, with a difference. The Southern Railway has converted them into travelling snack bars, and by bars I really mean bars. The snacks are available too, of course, and altogether the journey to Hastings, on which the first of these modern services is running, is going to be a jollier and more sociable business. Incidentally, there's going to be no discrimination between classes of ticket holders, so third and first class travellers needn't look suspiciously or even defiantly at one another over this new improvement for passengers. Good old Southern.
At last, the GI brides are on their way, off to new homes in many parts of the States. Here are some of the first to set out on their long and exciting journey. A few of the 600 out of a total of some 50,000, on their way to the transit camp at Tidworth. It's reported that about half a dozen failed to turn up. They missed the bus, but as you see, Mr. Chadd didn't.
In January 1946, a Metropolitan line train of tea stock dating from the late 1920s arrives at London's Baker Street station to display to the press and public the third car in the set, an experimental trailer with air-operated doors and saloon-type seating. Whilst the old tea stock were compartment coaches with outward opening doors, this new car introduced passenger-operated sliding doors and featured a unique seating arrangement, whereby the majority of the seats were fitted in the centre in back-to-back groups of 3, with gangways each side of the car. This layout proved to be unliked by the majority of passengers. A second experimental car was introduced in June 1947, and modifications made to the internal layout of the vehicles led to the design of the A60 stock introduced on the Metropolitan in 1961.
Cathay Air pictures over the Nottingham-Nuneaton area of the Trent Valley tell the story of Britain's stormy weather. A February fill dyke, countrymen call it, but this time they're too full for comfort. It's water, water everywhere, with river and rain havoc isolating houses and cutting roads and railways to marooned villages and towns. How much water came down, you can guess from one look at High Street, Northwich, where the tide seems to be in. 6 feet of floodwater swirled in the main street. Not quite Venice, but a break for the local 3 men in a boat. 2 arches of the railway viaduct on the Bath-Shepton-Mallet Road collapsed. The xylophone effects of sleepers and rails gave train drivers an outsize in headaches. To round off the toll of disasters came yet another train crash. Outside Potters Bar Station, the King's Cross to Newcastle Express smashed into a local train. 2 soldiers were killed and 10 people injured. Split-second action by an LNER signalman stopped a 3rd train within a stone's throw of this 2-engine smash.
In London, poor old Victoria Station has been in the news again. as if it hadn't suffered enough from enemy action during the war, it must now have a serious fire, which did a lot of damage near platform number 1. The clock shows the time it broke out. It's thought to have started from overhead electric cables, and the picture shows clearly what a mess the fire caused in the booking office. Special carriages housing an exhibition of penicillin were got away from platform 1 and saved, but Southern Railway trains were held up all over the place, and as you see, offices in the station were thoroughly wrecked. In fact, Victoria once again looked like the morning after a blitz. This time, however, there were no casualties.
Just over 5 weeks after the blaze at Victoria, another of London's mainline terminal stations was hit by fire, this time at King's Cross. Fire broke out on the roof over platforms 1 to 5 just before 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the 29th of March 1946, while more than 50 men were doing repair work. Hundreds of planks had been laid along the girders in the roof, preparatory to the replacement of the glass. An acetylene burner had set alight one of the many large tarpaulins strung across the roof. The fire spread quickly through the planks and tarpaulins, resulting in a section of the roof about 200 feet by 70 feet being destroyed. The National Fire Service sent 10 pumps to the station, and the fire was extinguished in about an hour. Two trains standing in the station at the time had to be quickly pulled to safety, as pieces of charred wood and burning tarpaulin rained down on the platforms. Train services were only slightly disrupted. For a time, southbound mainline trains had to end their journey at Finsbury Park.
Before the war, when these shots were taken, the smallest railway in the world spent most of its busy days carrying holidaymakers. War gave the Midget Romney Hythe Express a coat of armor plate for anti-invasion patrol. Its freight was undersea Pluto pipeline. Now it's all over, back into service comes the Blue Coaster Hurricane Express, demobbed by the War Office, and once again on the lookout for a load of passengers. Just in time to make the world's smallest train comes Pathé's biggest cameraman, Ken Gordon. On this railway, you have to be the right shape to get in. If you're stoker on this trip, you bring the kitchen shovel. When the heat's on, it's all aboard, and we're off on the Romney Hythe and Dymchurch line. Charging along like a toy train on the drawing room carpet, the Lilliputian loco sways on 15-inch tracks, a quarter the size of the normal gauge. First stage to Journey's End is Hythe Station. The reception committee comprised the Mayor of Hythe and his brother mayor from Romney. Together, they launched the midget train on a giant post-war assignment.
It happened to be fine weather, but I expect London stations would have been like this anyway, for the vast majority of people intended to make the most of their first post-war Easter. As it was, the people put up with the crush, and the railways coped with the people. Luxury travel, by the way, has returned in the shape of the Golden Arrow train, in which you can travel in complete comfort to the coast. After crossing the Channel, you board the train again in France. If only this kind of travel were typical of journeys everywhere in Britain. But, well, maybe that's too much to hope for yet. We've heard an awful lot about the GI brides from time to time, but this was the scene as wives and children of Australians left London at the start of their long journey to the Commonwealth. Large numbers of British girls married Australian servicemen who came here during the war, and now at last these wives say goodbye to Britain and go on their way to rejoin their husbands and start a new life in the country of their adoption. Even if they do feel it a bit of a wrench, they must also find it an extremely thrilling moment. And as for the kids, they're probably somewhat puzzled by the whole thing. It's rather difficult to explain to the very young exactly where Australia is. Anyway, Britain wishes the best of luck to all of them, and may they settle down and live happily over there. In the Stirling Castle, they certainly have a fine ship to travel in.
This extract is from another of the many classroom films of the time. This one from 1946 depicted the journey of a postcard from London to a Devon village, illustrating the work of the Postal Service, the GPO. The postcard is taken to the Inland Letter Sorting Office at Mount Pleasant, located off Farringdon Road in the Clerkenwell area of central London. Prior to World War II, to cope with the ever-increasing amount of parcels, packets and letters being handled by the post office, a large new wing was opened at Mount Pleasant in 1934, bringing an unprecedented degree of mechanisation to postal sorting. Unfortunately unseen in this film, Mount Pleasant was connected to the post office's own underground railway, which ran between Paddington and Whitechapel, transporting mail to the principal district post offices along the route in small 2-foot gauge driverless trains. After sorting, John's postcard would be sent down a spiral chute to the station below and taken off to Paddington Station. The next part of the journey would be on board the Great Western Railway's travelling post office from Paddington to Penzance, the Night Mail. This train would leave London at 10:10 in the evening and arrive at Penzance at around 6:45 the following morning. The train departs hauled by County Class number 1013, County of Dorset, built in February 1946. On board the train, the mail is sorted into pigeonholes for all of the local post offices, which in the case of John's card is Ivybridge, some 9 miles from Plymouth. The mail train arrives, hauled by Castle Class number 5078, Beaufort.
aboard from London's Paddington Station. 300 youngsters from the city are off to seaside and sunshine at Weston-super-Mare. The first excursion of its kind since 1939, the Kiddies Express wins wholehearted approval from a public often critical of 1946 rail travel. On this trip, train-traveling showmen bring along a luggage of laughs. And Weston-super-Mare really went to town with a youngsters' reception committee for this trainload of distinguished visitors. Donkeys, pony carts, and all the fun of the sands paraded in triumph for a new and gayer Pied Piper procession. Maybe it was only a day trip, but it's one we'd like to see repeated in every seaside town.
Here's one example of the appalling weather Britain has lately had to endure. The watery scene is Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire. One of our cameramen travelling by train from Hull was held up by floods in a tunnel. His train had to be diverted, and he made these notes of the really severe flooding, which, as you see, has obviously done a lot of damage in the district. It isn't only Britain's crops that have suffered from this, the wettest September for many years. Our train's eye view gives you a pretty clear idea of the situation.
Construction of the Southern Railway's West Country and Battle of Britain classes of Steamline Pacifics had begun at Brighton Works in 1945. Brand new loco number 21C141 Wilton was filmed leaving the works on the 5th of October 1946. Begun in 1935 as part of London Transport's New Works programme of major investments across the capital's transport network, construction on the extension of the Central Line eastwards from Liverpool Street had been suspended in 1940, with much of the tunnelling work completed. Work resumed at the end of the conflict, and the line as far as Stratford was officially opened on the 3rd of December 1946 by Alfred Barnes, the Minister of Transport. Work on the rest of the extension beyond Stratford would continue over the next few years. This involved the Central taking over the existing London and North Eastern Railway's suburban branch line to Epping and Ongar in Essex, along with the opening of a new section of tube line between Leytonstone and Newbury Park, providing a loop through Hainault and the new suburbs of North Ilford. The passengers on the inaugural train stop off at the new station at Bethnal Green, the first stop eastwards from Liverpool Street. Bethnal Green was largely complete in 1940, although no rails had been laid, and was requisitioned for use as an air raid shelter. On the 3rd of March 1943, Bethnal Green Station was the scene of the worst civilian disaster of the war, when 173 people died in a terrifying crush caused by a woman entering the shelter falling at the bottom of the steps and those following falling on top of her. The newly completed Central Line exchange platforms at Stratford provided an interchange for tube passengers with the many LNER steam services which operated through here, both on local lines and on trains to Cambridge and Colchester and beyond. Central Line trains would eventually run as far as Epping, when electrification work on the line was completed in September 1949. The short single-line section between Epping and Ongar would remain steam-operated until it was eventually electrified in 1957. Former Great Eastern Railway B12 class, number 8540, hauls an express train through Stratford Station in this sequence filmed by Movietone in 1946, but apparently never used. Travelling in the opposite direction is a train hauled by a Nigel Gresley-designed B-17 class engine. The cameras move to London Liverpool Street Station, where we see number 2859, one of two B-17s clad in streamlining by the LNER in 1937 for use on the East Anglian Express to Norwich. Filming was also undertaken inside the signal box at Liverpool Street, as well as the Divisional Control Office.
The load of the 7:25 a.m. from Cromer this morning has been increased to 12 bogies.
Right, Control, that's too long for number 7. We shall have to divert to number 10 if you agree. Thank you. 7:25 Cromer to number 10 platform, please.
Arriving at Liverpool Street is another B-17 class. This is number 2835 Milton, based at March Shed in Cambridgeshire.
Special coaches for the royal train to be used by the King on his South African tour had a somewhat difficult journey to Birkenhead. Being too wide and too high for some of the tunnels and bridges, they'd had special bogies fitted. Here, coaches are being slewed back into a central position on the bogies after the adjustment necessary to pass through the tunnel. A number of railwaymen travelled with the train to carry out this work, and they were kept pretty busy. From Birmingham, the 88-mile trip took over 15 hours. The bogies to be used on the different South African gauge had arrived earlier at Birkenhead, where the coaches were loaded onto a floating crane for shipment aboard the steamship Explorer en route for the Cape. The royal tour is due to start about the middle of February, and this train should contribute to the smoothness of the extensive travelling involved.
The royal family arrive at Waterloo Station on the 31st of January 1947, at the start of their journey to South Africa for the first royal tour of the country by a reigning monarch. Bidding the travellers bon voyage was Queen Mary, widow of King George V, here being greeted by Prime Minister Clement Attlee. The King and Queen, accompanied by their daughters Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret, would travel by train to Portsmouth, from where they would sail to South Africa on board the recently completed HMS Vanguard, the last battleship to be built for the Royal Navy. In charge of the Royal Train was the immaculately turned out LN class, number 850 Lord Nelson.
This is how snowed-up Britain looks from the air. Heading north over London, the Pathé plane flies over icy streets and country. Coming to Northampton, familiar landmarks disappear under the white uniform. This is Leicester. And here's Leicester's mainline station. But where are the trains? Heading back towards London over the countryside, we find the trains marooned in the deep snow. Last town of the tour is Luton. The worst spell of weather for 50 years. We hope it'll be 50 more before we get another.
What with the coal shortage and resulting electricity cuts, the people of Britain can think of little else but the cold, especially with snow, icicles and burst pipes to remind them. Badly. German prisoners of war have been trying to keep the lines clear for the coal trains, but more drastic methods had to be found. One idea was to mount 2 jet aero engines on trucks and half melt, half blow the snow away. Reports say the experiment was successful. Certainly looks it anyway.
The use of these jet engines did prove successful in clearing away snow, varying in depth from 18 inches to 4.5 feet. The downside was that the force of the blast also blew away the ballast and knocked down line-side fences. The location for this test was Dowley Top Station on the old Brecon and Merthyr Tydfil Railway. These Frank Whittle designed turbojets were used in the Gloucester Meteor, Britain's first jet fighter, which had entered operational service in July 1944.
The Great Thaw was really a frost. At any rate, more snow and freezing weather followed immediately. Scenes in the Midlands tell their own story of what's been happening on the roads of Britain. Bulldozers, by the way, evidently make excellent snow ploughs, but chipping the ice off roads after the snow's gone seems an almost hopeless task. Farther north, the heavy snowfalls interfered with rail transport. Here's one method, perhaps a trifle primitive, of clearing the line.
Intended for use as stock shots, a number of Great Western Railway trains were filmed with sound at an unrecorded location in 1947. This is GWR Hall class, number 4945 Milligan Hall. Passing through the station is a 13-coach express passenger hauled by one of the GWR's Castle class locos. This is number 100 A1 Lloyds, one of 15 castles which were rebuilt by the GWR from earlier Star-class engines. Approaching Bunker First is one of the many GWR Prairie tanks on a local train. Another 13-coach express passenger train approaches the station. This one is hauled by County class, number 1027, County of Stafford. This is the only King-class loco seen in this sequence, number 6025 King Henry III. Working a goods train is one of the GWR's heavy freight 280s. A treat for all schoolboys hoping of becoming train drivers when they left school was this 1947 classroom film depicting a day in the life of an engine driver on the LMS, working a train from London St Pancras to Manchester Central on the former Midland Main Line. The booked locomotive for the train to Manchester is Jubilee class number 5614 Leeward Islands. The express steam locos that worked trains out of St Pancras were based here at Kentish Town Shed in northwest London. Before leaving the shed, the engine is thoroughly checked over. The driver oils the motion, and the fireman ensures that the sandboxes are full. With steam raised, the engine crew set off from the shed light engine. From Kentish Town, the locomotive travels tender first through Camden to the terminus at St Pancras. Slowing on approach to the station, we run past 4P class Fairburn tank, number 2681, and Black 5, number 4815. For the departure from St Pancras, the filmmakers have used a shot of the Black 5 we saw a moment ago. The train pulls away from St Pancras, banked by 4P class Fowler tank number 2329, another Kentish Town loco.
last stage of the South African tour, involving altogether a journey of something like 25,000 miles, was reached when Vanguard and her escort steamed in towards Portsmouth. Ashore, vast crowds had collected to see the homecoming. From every point where they could get a view, people had been waiting to wave and cheer. Ceremonies in Portsmouth included the visit to the Guildhall, where by tradition the keys of the fortress of the city were presented. The royal family finished the short journey to the station on foot. There remained the train journey to London and the welcome awaiting them in the capital. At Waterloo, they were received by the Duke of Wellington, Lord Lieutenant of the County of London, the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. And now began the drive to Buckingham Palace. Londoners were out in their tens of thousands, and the drive was a triumph all the way.
Almost any morning at any of London's underground stations, you're likely to run into Mr. Leonard Ware, a man with one of the strangest jobs there are. A London transport official, he's the rubber outer, the doodler's enemy and the poster girl's friend. With a pocket full of assorted rubbers, Mr. Ware spring cleans the changing faces of London's posters. This Mr. Ware will tell you is kids' stuff, and children are among the biggest offenders. Mr. Chad boomed in wartime, but is rapidly going out of fashion. Late trains, idle hands, and a kink some people have for trying to improve on nature as the artist sees it all make extra work for Mr. Ware. The moustaches are by far the most popular form of poster decoration, but 5 minutes of the rubber man's treatment is as good as a facial. Why do people scribble? Mr. Ware says there are 3 reasons. Some doodlers think they're improving the original, or just being funny, or they like to destroy. Whichever way, it would cost thousands to replace the posters without Mr. Ware's spring cleaning. A word with a station official, and Mr. Ware's on the track of another desecrated damsel. This time it's the cigarette scribbler's handiwork. Psychiatrists would probably trace this kind of vandalism to tobacco shortage. Years ago it saw the pomp and splendor of state occasions. Time was when visiting monarchs stepped ashore on the now derelict jetty. Today the station seldom sees a visitor. Royal yachts of Europe's kings and presidents once rode at anchor here, and loneliness comes to old Stephen Hills as he remembers. He was a boy when the station was Britain's pride. He recalls it as it was, when royal trains drew in along these same tracks. He remembers this platform when it was gay with scarlet uniforms and decked with bunting and flags, when brass bands and guards of honor lined the way. Now he's left with loneliness and his memories. Alone. Old Stephen and his dead-end station are a one-man concern. He
He's the porter and signalman, clerk and ticket man and station master in one. There's a lot to do, but lots of time to do it. Only 2 trains a day call here now. 4 tickets to collect from one train is a rush. 8 visitors a day is a crowd. When he feels loneliest, old Stephen likes to pretend, to make believe that nothing has changed, that he and his station are back in their days of glory. And when he gets ready for the afternoon train to come in, he pretends it's a party arriving from London to greet an important visitor from the continent. Even strangers are welcome to a lonely man, but there's not even one today. To break the silence, even for a chat about the weather, is something to look forward to. Like his newspaper, and what if it is hours late? Loneliness comes and goes for Stephen Hills according to a railway timetable.
At Balby, 1 mile south of Doncaster, lie the twisted remains of 2 Leeds-bound express trains. Packed with 1,200 holidaymakers returning to their Yorkshire homes, this was a journey to death for 18 of them. 74 of their fellow passengers were injured, 8 coaches were derailed. Once again, experts believe that steel frames prevented an even higher casualty list. Many passengers received only a shaking. Breakdown gangs worked all night to clear the lines. Giant cranes lifted the wrecked coaches off the lines. It was Britain's greatest disaster since New Year's Day, when 20 people were killed in the Trent Valley at Lichfield. Ministry of Transport officials have gone to Doncaster to inquire into the cause.
Waterloo Station was again the scene of a grand royal event. This time the occasion was the wedding of Princess Elizabeth and Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, on the 20th of November 1947. Hauling the royal train, taking the couple on honeymoon, was Southern Railway Lord Nelson class, number 857 Lord Howe. Following the wedding, which had taken place earlier in the day at Westminster Abbey, Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh arrive at Waterloo Station, along with the Princess's corgi, Susan. The destination for the royal train was Winchester, from where the newlyweds would travel to Broadlands, home of Philip's uncle, Earl Mountbatten, to spend their wedding night there. They would later travel on to Birk Hall on the Balmoral estate for the rest of their honeymoon. On the 1st of January 1948, the railways, along with long-distance road haulage and other transport concerns, were taken over by the state. British Railways was created under the overall management of the British Transport Commission. This extract from a public information film from the time provides an overview of the full scope of the nationalisation of the country's transport network.
In 1947, by Act of Parliament, Britain set up the British Transport Commission. Its task, through its executives, to make all transport work as one. To operate a nation's railways, 120 reduced to 4 and now reduced to 1. To coordinate the transport that runs on 200,000 miles of roads. To operate the docks and revive a nation's waterways, extensive but long neglected.
And the buses and lorries, what have we taken on there? Well, even here there were the beginnings of amalgamation, but compared with the railways, they were a young industry. So you had big combines and a mass of small operators. That's why the job of taking them over bristles with problems for all concerned, the Transport Commission, the men who run them, and the men who drive them. And the railways, what have we got there? Operated for more than 100 years without a break. Feeding a war machine for 6 weary years without adequate renewals and repairs that left them as tired as the rest of us. A wonderful but complicated heritage that could do with a bit of sorting out. They've taken over the whole chute, the nice bits and the awkward bits, from the level crossing down to the railway sandwich. And that was a heritage, if you like.
It's always been noisy in the shops, but if they complain today, I've got an answer. We're knocking 4 railways into 1. That's bound to cause a bit of a clatter. We're taking the thing a stage further than it had already gone. To save waste and overlapping, we've got to standardise. And standardisation on such a big scale as this can only be done as it comes. Each railway in the Big 4 group had their own way of doing things. Now what we have to do is to examine them all and take the best from each. Everything from carriage bogies to signalling. Now there's a problem in itself. Think of all the different types of signals that do different jobs, of all the different systems, each highly complicated in itself. And then the jobs that needed doing anyway. A railway can't stand still in more ways than one. New methods to meet new needs, whether it's shifting goods or shifting a junction. Electrification, expanding old schemes that had already proved themselves. New schemes, anything to make a railway move. On the railways, new things will come all right, but it's not going to be done in a day. It needs time, forethought, money, and a lot of hard work.
Road transport, railways, canals and docks. To view them all together and make them work as one. That is the task. And now it must be done.
The first chairman of the Railway Executive, accountable to the British Transport Commission for the running of British Railways, was Sir Eustace Missenden. Seen here in 1949 at Waterloo Station, where newly built Battle of Britain class number 34090 was being named, both in his honour and as a tribute to the war effort of the Southern Railways employees. Missenden had started work with the South Eastern Railway in 1899 as a junior clerk and had risen through the ranks to become general manager of the Southern Railway in 1941. The loco was painted in a commemorative malachite green livery that included green painted wheels with yellow rims, along with the early British Railways crest on the tender. An example of the more basic British Railways livery for steam engines which was introduced upon nationalisation can be seen in this film shot at Glasgow Central Station in January 1949. The occasion was the renaming of former LMS Royal Scot class number 46121 Highland Light Infantry, the City of Glasgow Regiment, seen here in lined black livery with the words British Railways emblazoned on the tender. A fatal crash occurred at London Bridge Station on the morning of the 23rd of January 1948. The 805 train from Seaford to London Bridge, formed of two 6-coach electric sets, failed to stop at a red signal just outside the station and collided with an empty train standing in platform 14, pushing the empty train back through the stop blocks and onto the concourse. The driver of the 805 and a colleague travelling with him to learn the route were both killed, and a passenger on the concourse later died of his injuries.
At Hazelmere, Surrey, the railway siding on a Sunday looks just like thousands of others up and down the country. Porters proclaim that the turn-round of coal wagons is one of the worst bottlenecks in Britain's production drive. The difference here is that Hazelmere decided to do something about it. So the local cricket team turned out for a Sunday fixture at the railway station. The whole affair, hard work, blisters and all, goes with a swing, and the score mounts as the amateur coal heavers get into the rhythm of it. And when each fully loaded lorry moves off, well, it's as good as hitting a six. Industrial experts say that this spontaneous volunteer work means that Britain has beaten the post-war reaction and tiredness, the peacetime letdown from high endeavour and enterprise that kept us going through those great and perilous years. If this is so, and we are round the dangerous corner, the nation owes a great deal to the cricketers of Hazelmere and all the other men and women who are giving up their spare time. They've proved that once the British people are told the facts and know what is wanted, they can always be relied upon to find a way to get it done.
To publicise the part they were playing in the post-war export drive, in 1948 the Morris Motors Works at Cowley in Oxford showed off their twice-daily car train service operated by the Great Western Railway. The loaded trains ran to Brentford Dock, a major transshipment point for the GWR in West London, from where the cars were transferred by barge to the docks downstream of the City of London. The immediate post-war period was marked by severe austerity and rationing, and the government pressured manufacturers to export as many products as possible to offset a crippling dollar debt to the USA. This had the unfortunate result for companies such as Morris of starving the home market of new vehicles. After the Cowley Works was used to produce a vast array of items for the war effort, everything from torpedoes and mines to tanks, trucks and Tiger Moth training planes, car production started up again here in 1945, rolling out updated versions of pre-war models such as the Morris 10s seen here. At an engineering company in Slough in Berkshire, one of the workers, Charlie Coatsworth, receives news that he has been allocated one of a number of old railway carriages being converted by the company into temporary housing for their staff. Accompanied by Mr. G.B. Treglowen, the personnel manager, he goes off to see his new house. The company had purchased a varied selection of ageing wooden coach bodies, which they had sited in a nearby field. These were in the process of being fitted out internally to a comfortable standard, including electric heating and cooking facilities, as well as being plumbed in for mains water and sewerage. There was a desperate shortage of housing in Britain after World War II, with over 2 million houses having been destroyed or badly damaged by bombing. Large numbers of slums also remained a problem. A massive programme of rebuilding was instigated by Clement Attlee's post-war government, constructing more than 1 million homes, 80% of which were council houses.
There's a more comfortable way of reaching the heights. 3,560 feet to the top of Snowdon, and you do it sitting down. The only railway in Britain still unnationalised, it runs from Easter to mid-October, snow and weather permitting. Return fare, 10 bob. And there are always more customers than seats. 50,000 last year to be exact, so let's take ours. Powerful steel cogs prevent you running backwards, so just relax. Built in 1896 on a Swiss model, the railway has a track of 4.5 miles and gets you to the top in just over an hour. During the war, the summit was used by the Navy as a radar station, and the RAF had a beam station there. This little train did real national service. Imagine carrying a kit bag up here after a week's leave. Mother, what's that funny thing? It's all right, dear. It's only stupid men playing trains. You'll get used to it. The going's getting tougher. In the steepest places, a gradient of 1 in 5, and it's hard work on the engine. But for all its smallness, it's more powerful than many a mainline engine. Steady, old girl. Easy does it. Oh dear, she's stopping. But it's only for a drink, and wouldn't you if you had to climb this far. Enid's very feminine. Just a little care and attention, and she's off again. Now we're really in the wilds, with magnificent country on either side. Whoever thought of running a railway up here?
Floods in Scotland and on the border, notably in and around Berwick-on-Tweed, have been widespread and done great damage. Our pictures show vividly the sort of destruction that has been wrought. Railway lines submerged and bridges broken. The result, of course, has been very serious for the thousands of people in the affected areas, communications being cut and heavy losses incurred. Havoc has been caused to buildings of all kinds. Cottage homes have had to be evacuated. Many are total ruins.
1,000 square miles of Britain are flooded. A disaster as great as that which brought havoc to the Fenland earlier this year sweeps northern England and southern Scotland. Acres of Britain's most picturesque countryside are underwater. Torrential August rains make fast-flowing rivers break their banks and bring the border country's worst floods in memory. pressure of water from the River Eye and its tributaries sweeps away piers supporting 5 railway bridges on the main London-Edinburgh route. Suspended crazily in mid-air, the lines will be out of normal action for some time. Slowed down trains diverted on cross-country routes hinder commerce and bring delays to the whole nation. Many villages throughout Berwickshire are completely cut off. Farmers, held up by summer rain, face losses they describe as catastrophic. Damage runs into millions of pounds.
Well, there's a coincidence. The things I get up to. With all me pals from the old Kent Road, I'm off to Kent on a fortnight shopping. You know, picking the stuff what puts the bit in the bitter. Here's Grandpa. What a geezer. 45 hopping holidays in a row. He's kept the brewers busy for a lifetime. Roll up, pour the bull for the Paddock Wood Special. There's no pushing and shoving. Everything's nice and ladylike. Grandma gets a bit of cheek from the bloke what snips the tickets. What, says he? Don't tell me you're an hopper. No, she says. I'm not. I'm a GI bride. Where's the honeymoon express? The things we get up to. Getting the prams and luggage in a carriage. With Mum asking the old man, Harry, did you turn the gas off like what I told you? Here we are, we're off. What with the kids yelling and Grandma getting crowned with a piece of china what falls off to the rack onto her nap within the country in no time. Now, I'm an authority on the country. When you gets there, there's a funny smell. That's the air. After all, the only difference between a bus and a cow is the smell. There's the old home from home. Mind you, it ain't no luxury holiday camp like. But we don't need none of this mass psychological stuff to get us cracking. Fact is, hop picking is just the job for the likes of me. The things I get up to, I'll be smoking next, if I could get 'em.
Spotlight on the new Battle of Waterloo. The battle against time to get new lines laid without upsetting the passenger timetable of one of London's busiest stations. Here's how it was done. Once the old and faulty track is removed, pre-assembled units of track are lowered into place from a machine running along the next set of rails. Each unit is 60 feet long and weighs 4 1/4 tons. 4 wagons do the job, 3 carrying new track, 1 taking the old track away. Watch how the machine drops its load perfectly into position. Pathé Pictorial filmed the new Battle of Waterloo one Monday, as busy a day as any in the week. Yet the whole job of putting down 840 feet of track, 260 yards of it, took 40 men only 3 hours. With the track snugly in place, it's only a few minutes' work for gangers to follow up and hammer home the bolts. A case of a little ingenuity going a long way to ensure that the trains go through. Now let's call on the folks who live in Britain's most curious home, Tunnel House. Why tunnel? Let's see. To look at, Tunnel House is pretty much like any other home. The Reynolds family have lived here for 43 years. But here's where the difference begins. A tunnel on the main London-Brighton line runs directly underneath the Reynolds home. The first train passes at 6 in the morning, the last at midnight. But after 43 years, the Reynolds never noticed the noise. In fact, home just wouldn't be home without it.
Fog, the longest and thickest on record, brings Britain its darkest days since the blackout. Blanketing all parts of the country, it gives transport services an even bigger headache than bank holiday. Trains run hours behind time. In 144 hours of non-stop fog, 5 trains are in collision. 4 die, 50 are injured. In day and night ordeal, signalmen work heroically to bring passengers safely through. The miracle is that so few lost their lives. The railway workers deserve the nation's thanks. Detonators laid on the rails signal the approach of oncoming trains. Despite everything, they still go through. The culprit is the November sun. Having already shed its summer load, it fails to provide sufficient heat to dispel warm currents of air arriving from the Gulf Stream. Once here, the fog comes to stay. Emergency flares guide traffic through city streets plunged in gloom. Until the fog finally lifted, Britain was back in the dark ages.
This is some rare footage of Oliver Bulleid's last steam design for the Southern under construction at Brighton Works, the controversial Leader class, an articulated 0660 tank with cabs at either end. The boiler, firebox and smoke box were encased in steel sheeting that resembled a modern diesel locomotive. Construction of 5 of these locomotives had begun in July 1947. Only one was ever completed. The prototype ran on trials until 1951, when the entire project was quietly dropped after Bulleid left British Railways to become Chief Mechanical Engineer of CIE in Ireland. Steam engines of a more traditional manner are seen in this closing sequence, filmed at the opening of British Railways' new loco test plant at Rugby. Streamlined A4 Sir Nigel Gresley was brought to the site to commemorate the part that Gresley had played in the creation of the testing facility. Gresley, who died in 1941, had for many years expressed the desirability of creating a national locomotive testing station to be at the disposal of all the mainline railway companies. Whilst the GWR had their own stationary test plant at Swindon, and the Southern saw the future in electrification, in 1937 the LMS and the LNER jointly agreed to build this test plant at Rugby, work on which was well advanced when halted by the outbreak of war in 1939. Construction resumed after the war and was officially opened in October 1948. The tests undertaken here established the financial cost in terms of coal and water of hauling different train loads at different speeds over given routes, along with an indication of the level of the efficiency of the locomotive. It also provided a means of comparing one engine design with another on a common basis. Sophisticated mobile road testing equipment introduced in the early 1950s, along with the inevitable demise of the steam locomotive on British Railways, led to a short working life for the plant at Rugby, which undertook its last locomotive test in 1959.
strange, if you think of it, how dear to us British people are railways. We've cursed the discomforts they've given us these past 6 years, but still they stand to most of us as a link with happier days. Highlights of childhood were those yearly family excursions when we glued our noses to the window, watching for that first glimpse of the sea. Next to that thrill was the Christmas tide, which brought us that toy railway, with its tiny circular track and the engine with the key that we always lost. Now we're grown up, our interest in railways has lapsed, except of course as passengers. So let us renew our youthful acquaintance with the monsters of the Iron Road. Thanks to modern engineering, turning a 150-ton engine round has become quite a simple job. The vacuum brake is connected up with the turntable, the vacuum is created in the engine brake system, and the table put into gear when the gauge shows sufficient vacuum. And so, with the ease of that legendary acrobat, the engine swings smoothly round, and within a few seconds it has turned a half circle, ready to drive off again. The table is stopped, and the engine chugs off with slow dignity in the direction of the coaling plant. Here, 500 tons of coal are stored to feed the ever-hungry locomotives. The coal wagons are shunted into place at the foot of the plant, locked to a section of the line, and then taken up, and by this means a plentiful supply of coal is always on hand for the engines. At first sight, this seems like carrying coals to Newcastle, but on inspection we find it quite logical. At the top, the truck is automatically tipped and empties, then starts its journey down again. Here, everything is done in strict rotation. After the engine has turned, it comes along for its supply of coal. The chute is opened and 7 tons pour in. Not a bit too much nor too little, just enough for a 400-mile journey. Then off she goes again, this time to take water. The fireman makes sure that the leather hose pipe is properly in the tank, otherwise he might get a soaking. A streamliner takes 5,000 gallons of water, which has been specially softened. You see, engines prefer it that way. Next, the front is opened so that the smoke box can be cleaned out. Ashes and clinkers must be completely removed from all corners so that the fire will draw well when it's relit. Who would know better than the ladies the importance of appearances? And hence we find the toilet of these monsters is left in their capable hands. Wheels, rods and bodywork are polished up until they shine like new pins. It's wonderful what a bit of well-applied elbow grease will do. But things are not always plain sailing, and sometimes an urgent repair has to be undertaken at the shed. Here, for instance, a pair of wheels is receiving attention. Constant running means constant overhauls. Outside, the engine is waiting to have its fire rekindled. A few shovelfuls of coal are put into the firebox together with a special fire lighter. Within a couple of hours, it is burned up nicely, although it takes about twice as long before enough steam is produced to start the journey, when a blazing inferno turns water into driving power. We'll refrain from telling this gentleman any funny stories about wheel tappers. It may be just as well, for it's obvious that this is a highly skilled job. To the experienced ear, the ring of the hammer conveys the soundness of the wheel, and the slightest fault can be detected when the hammer strikes. In fact, the whole safety of a train may well depend upon the alertness of this man's ears. Our railways have always played for safety, and their achievement is envied all over the world. Before each journey, the brake mechanism is inspected. Various methods of braking are employed. Even the smallest fault may endanger the safety of the train, but thanks to the vigilance of the railway engineer, nothing is overlooked. The pressure is checked on the gauge, and outside, the engineer's mate watches to see that the actual brake works smoothly. The test finished, they move on to the next engine. This introduces Tom and Fred, driver and fireman. After signing on, they look at the notice board. Schedules are sometimes altered at short notice. Then they collect their kits from the store. Yes, oil lamps are still in use, but soon they'll miss the smell of oil when they change over to electricity. Sometimes they get a different engine and wonder what today's will be like to handle. The lamp denotes that they travel light engine. Leaving Tom and Fred to check over their engine, we go over to the carriage department and find that here 7,000 coaches are cleaned inside and out every day before you and I are allowed in. First, the carriages are drawn through this unique contraption which thoroughly cleans the woodwork, washing away all the dirt and grime of the tunnels and tarns. Water is forced through these giant mops, which are kept revolving while the carriages pass along, thus ensuring that each one is evenly washed, while outside, the men scrub the woodwork to get off the loosened dirt. With that job finished, the coaches are polished, but there are many other things to be seen to as well. And to keep the wheels turning smoothly, the boxes are topped up with oil every day. In fact, every working part receives attention, just like the engine. Inside, the women are busy sweeping up the ravages of the last journey. If they were asked, they'd tell you that smokers are the most untidy folk, with bun munchers a good second. And it's surprising how many people forget the pennies on the empties. Every set of carriages is equipped with a dynamo which supplies the light. These are driven by belts off the main axle, and as soon as the train reaches about 30 miles an hour, electricity is automatically generated and stored in batteries, which have to be regularly checked to make sure that they are in order for a long journey. At last, all the various jobs are finished, and along moves the shunting engine to pull the carriages to the station. But first comes the business of coupling up and connecting the vacuum brake. For no matter how short the journey, the brake must work throughout the train. Within a few minutes, they arrive at the terminus to make up the Scottish Express, and soon the platform will come to life. Already the passengers are arriving at the station, and here life is just one arrival after departure. On any station, the crowd is cosmopolitan, duke and dustman rubbing shoulders, farewells mingled with joyful greetings. High above the corrects us to our train through the microphone with cold aloofness, and we can't help envying her intimate knowledge of the railway timetable, which has always baffled us.
For first, Northampton, Darlington, Durham, Morton, Scarborough, Driffield, Bridlington.
Passengers take a quick cup of tea while supplies are loaded on the restaurant car, with, we hope, an opener. And the bookstores do a brisk trade with books from advanced economics to comics. With 5 minutes to go, the express engine backs into the station with all the dignity of the star performer. The Train Spotters Club, that organization of youngsters which still haunts the stations just as we did, takes down our number. The peaceful exterior of the signal seals the intense activity inside. From here, the comings and goings of 7,000 trains daily is controlled. Railway signalling is a bit of a mystery to the layman, for the whole system here is automatic, and the levers not only operate the signals, but ring up the track numbers from which the train is due to leave. The signalman can watch the progress of each train as it enters or leaves the station on this illuminated diagram. Each section of the rail is locked until the train has passed over it, thus avoiding accidents. Back at the station, late arrivals are trying to find vacant seats. Those favourite corner ones facing the engine have been taken long ago. Only a few seconds to go. The track number comes up on the signal after the points have slid over into position. The guard waves his familiar green flag, and slowly the giant engine begins to move dead on time. The stragglers make an imprudent last-minute rush, and with a push they're aboard, while the train steams slowly from the station. Inside, the passengers are settling down to their long journey, and for the next 7 hours, the train will be their home. The dismal housing of the great city slips behind, and as we approach the open country, we move forward to the driver's cab. Does the driver enjoy this journey?
Yes, I suppose I do. It's my life. I still remember the great feeling I got when I brought my first express to speed over these tracks and felt the sway of the engine. Passengers don't feel that as one does up here. I did 15 years hard slogging on local lines before I got my job on a passenger express, so that first run meant a lot to me. I remember how I welcomed the sight of Welwyn Viaduct, feeling that the uphill drag was over and we could get down to making up lost time. We were making 70 miles an hour average then. Schedules are still pretty tight. This opening haul up to speed fairly eats the steam. About time we picked up our first refill of water. Down the line there are water troughs from which we suck up fresh supplies, and along we come, 70 miles an hour, picking up 5,000 gallons in a few seconds, hardly losing a drop. Back on the train, the attendants are setting up the tables in the dining car. Passengers expect their meals on time, just as if they were at home. We take ours from a billy can. The chefs are busy in the all-electric kitchen. Wouldn't my missus like that cooking outfit? We're nearing Peterborough now. I can always tell it by the sharp smell of burnt clay from the brickfield. It's odd how one recognises places by the smell. Peterborough, York, Newcastle, they all put something of their own into the air. Passengers don't notice that sort of thing. Only the kids have poked their noses out of the windows. Fred gets down to a bit of firing. Only a little at a time, that's his motto. Coal in the tender is always kept wet to make it burn longer. 7 tons has to do the trip, and it keeps the dust down and prevents it from blowing into our eyes. In a few minutes we pull into Doncaster. This was a green engine town, the old Great Northern. It's still a railway town, of course. The folks still call the big railway workshops the plant. It's still the finest loco works there is, and there's hardly a railway in the world that hasn't had a few engines built here. My grandfather claimed he was the finest turner in the wheel shops. The men who work here now still have the same ideas, the sense of pride and responsibility as skilled tradesmen.
Here, men of brawn and brain toil among the flying sparks and in the overpowering heat. And as the white-hot metal is poured into the moulds, a new engine starts its life. In another shop, the sheets of metal are heated up for pressing by those powerful gas furnaces which generate a terrific heat within a few minutes. Slings carry the heavy sheet to the press. It exerts a pressure of 850 tons, pressing the metal into shape as easily as tin foil. In this industry, men and machines combine to produce speed and efficiency. In this plant, there are several shops, each dealing with a separate part of construction. Here's a shaping machine which cuts through the tough steel as if it were butter. Accuracy plays a vital part in all engineering work. Gears must be cut to 1,000th part of an inch. The slightest flaw means a reject. But in these workshops, good workmanship is the byword. Rods are fed into this machine, which turns them into bolts. Several hundred are used in the building of a single engine, and everything from the smallest screw to the largest boiler is made here. Ingenious testing machines have been devised to make sure that every part is perfect before it is used. This one projects a greatly enlarged image of screws on a ground glass screen, enabling the operator to detect the slightest flaw. The sparks from the electric arc welder fly high into the air like a firework gala, while the machine welds the various parts together at lightning speed. And in another shop, the acetylene welders are at work in their weird masks, giving the scene an almost eerie atmosphere. As the boilers are assembled, the engine gradually takes shape, but there is still a lot more to be done. All the different departments work in harmony with each other. Our railway stock is renowned the world over, and the fellows in these shops jealously guard their reputation for good craftsmanship and efficiency. The engineers work quietly on, oblivious of the deafening rattle of the pneumatic riveting machines as they punch home the rivets with amazing accuracy. The old method of hammering home the red-hot rivets is a thing of the past, for this new method has proved speedier and more effective, and new engines are wanted quickly so that you may travel in more comfort. In another workshop, the calculated blows of the drop hammer stamp out many of the smaller accessories, such as this coupling hook and 1,001 other items. Further on, a steel bar is being cut by oxyacetylene as clean as a whistle. At last, the engine takes on its familiar appearance. Boiler and cab have already been mounted on the frame, but still the numerous controls have to be installed. However, she's already something worth looking at, and I envy the driver who gets her put on his run. The intricate system of steam pipes still has to be connected in the smoke box. The foreman checks over the blueprint to make sure that every detail is correct. Around the back, the engineers are fixing up the controls in the cab. This is the nerve center, and everything depends on the gear being just right. Next, the huge rods are fixed. And before long, the wheels will turn under their own steam for the first time. A proud moment for the fellows who built her. At last, she emerges from the workshops, sleek and polished, a new locomotive and a thing of beauty. For the next few days, she will go out on trial runs, and when the experts are satisfied, she will take her place in the service of the Iron Road.
Well, it's time we got back to our engine to move on again. Yes, the wheels often slip when we start up with a heavy load. Back in the kitchen, the chef's dishing up as we speed through the countryside. Already the first lunch is being served. Some passengers seem to think that we save up all the jolts for the soup, but the experienced traveller knows that there's an art in eating on a train, just as in a ship. We find sandwiches save a lot of bother all round. In between the mouthfuls, we may get a glimpse of the old market town of Selby, with its fine old abbey. But most folks are too busy seeing what comes next on the menu. Meanwhile, we're negotiating the short curve just before running into York Station with its long platform. 188 miles in 3 hours. Not exactly a record, perhaps, but pretty good going for these days. During the summer, we run non-stop, but now we're making a short halt. And as we pull in, there's the usual bustle on the platform. I'm told that York is one of the oldest cities in England, where the remains of the old Roman walls are still to be seen, and the ancient buildings that line the streets make a grand picture of historical old England.
The city also has many large modern industries, including the carriage works. Here, wood is used as well as steel. But first, the huge teak logs must be fed into the electric saw, which slices them up into planks in the space of a few seconds. More than 5 tons of wood are needed to build each carriage. In the main workshop, we find a line of carriages in various stages of construction. Of course, this is not such an involved business as the building of engines, but nonetheless, a lot of planning and work goes on into these carriages, for, believe it or not, they do try to study your comfort. Carpenters, like engineers, are craftsmen, and the woodwork has a finish which reflects their skill. The cookers in the dining car are run off a special dynamo, and the wiring up is an intricate job which calls for an expert electrician. In fact, many trades are involved in this job, and in another workshop, we find the upholsterers at work on the seats. After the frames have been made, comes the tricky business of fixing the seat springs. On the next bench, the horsehair stuffing is put in, but as you can see, it has to be carefully evened out to avoid any lumps. After this, the covering is tacked on and the job is finished. In a completed carriage, the racks are being fixed, and then comes the seating. The whole coach has a luxurious air, and those armchairs look like the latest thing in comfort. So let's hope that when the carriage is put into service, you will be fortunate enough to get a seat. Now, all that remains to be done is to prepare the outside for the final coat of paint and varnish.
Back at the station, more passengers waiting for us. Usually we have to take over another engine at York, although sometimes we keep the same one right through. Now we're ready to move off again, and we pull gently away from the station. It takes a bit of time to get going with a heavy load, and this trip we're pulling 15 coaches, but we soon get into our stride. The next few miles are dead straight and quite level, which makes it easy going for me, but I've got to keep my eye on the track ahead just the same. We take no chances with the signals. And speaking of that, there's Northallerton signal box coming up. It's the most up-to-date on the run. It controls the track several miles in each direction. By means of bell codes, the train is offered to this signal box and it's accepted if the line is clear. And all this is accomplished by turning these little switches on the panel. The signalman can see the exact position on this diagram of every train as it moves through his section. And with the switch in front of him, he can control the tracks and signals. His mate notes down the time of every train as it passes through. And if we don't want to be entered as late, we must be getting on. Like Oliver Twist, our furnace is always wanting more, so Fred gets down to doing a bit more stoking. We're doing pretty well now. Well, I suppose 75 miles an hour doesn't mean much in these days. Still, we do carry a couple of thousand passengers, and that's more than your aeroplanes do. Of course, we get to know the route and can pick out the various landmarks, but it's the industrial areas which always interest me. Meanwhile, the passengers are sitting up and taking notice. We're coming to the outskirts of Durham. At the viaduct, we have to slow down a bit, and this gives you folk a chance of getting a good look at Durham Cathedral and the castle. I've heard it said that the railway provides the best view of those grand old buildings, and I must say they look fine in that soft evening sun. And as we pass, the passengers crane their necks for a last glimpse. Now they sit back again while we race on another 18 miles to Newcastle, rushing through the deserted local stations, out into the open country again. At this time of year, it all looks very pleasant. Yes, this is Newcastle. Below us are the waters of the River Tyne, and along its banks the large shipbuilding yards. Beyond there are the high level and swing bridges. But Newcastle is also the largest coal mining centre in the country, and hence the fine large station to deal with a constant stream of traffic, north and south. We go straight through, out of the station, passing the huge goods yards and picking our way slowly through the maze of tracks. Soon we're out in the open countryside and can put on more speed. And while some of you take a nap, we're straining every effort to get you to your destination on time. Fred does a bit more stoking. Useful practice for the future, maybe. Now we're approaching the border at Berwick, over the old stone bridge with its 15 arches, and so into Scotland, although so far the landscape seems unaltered. But now, folks, you're almost there, and within a few minutes we shall be pulling into Waverley Station, Edinburgh. The old Preston Pans Tower marks our arrival. And now you can start sorting out your baggage.
This is Waverley Station, Edinburgh.
And so a 400-mile run is completed. Perhaps not exactly on time, but nearer to the mark than most things are in these days. Our passengers hurry off, intent on their own lives. Another railway journey over. A step in time and distance to a city which means something different to each one of them. Homecoming to some, perhaps the last lap from far distant lands, when the sight of this grand familiar city grips the throat with a choking feeling of affection and relief. To them, this journey will be memorable forever. Unconsciously, they will join the ranks of those who hold a warm corner of their heart for Britain's Iron Road. To them, it is a part of our way of life, just as this trip has been to Tom and Fred, part of the job of keeping the wheels still turning over the tracks which link our lives with the past and bear us to a fuller future.